The man had always believed trust was the strongest bond two people could share. Since childhood, his best friend had been by his side, through storms, through hunger, through laughter, and through the quiet nights when dreams felt far away. They had built everything together, small victories, shared meals when money was scarce, and promises that no matter how life turned, they would never betray each other. The man never doubted those promises. He remembered the nights when they sat on broken benches in the neighborhood park, talking about how one day they would rise above their struggles. The friend had leaned close, his voice sharp with passion, saying, "No one will ever break us. We will rule together." And the man had believed him. Time passed, and opportunities came. Slowly, they worked their way into business, first with small trades and then with bigger deals. The man handled the details with honesty, while the friend charmed people with words and smiles. Together, they were unstoppable. People in the community began to speak their names with respect, saying how loyal they were, how rare it was to see two men so united in trust. But trust is fragile, and greed creeps in quietly. The man never noticed the small signs at first, the whispered phone calls, the papers his friend signed without showing him, the way the friend's eyes lingered too long on the money when deals closed. The man only saw the bond they shared, and he chose to believe nothing could break it. Then one morning, as he arrived at their office, he noticed people staring at him strangely. Whispers followed him down the hall. A coldness hung in the air, different from the warmth he was used to. He entered the conference room, expecting his friend to greet him with a smile, but instead, silence met him. On the table lay papers he had never seen, contracts with his name missing, his signature forged. And standing at the far end was his best friend, the same boy he once called brother, his arms folded, his smile cruel. "It's done," the friend said casually, as if it meant nothing. "The deal is mine now." The man froze, his chest tightening. "What do you mean, yours? We built this together." But the friend laughed, his eyes shining with arrogance. "You built it? Yes. But I sold it. I got money, power, and respect. What did you get? A dream. Dreams don't pay bills." The man's heart pounded as realization sank in. His best friend had betrayed him, selling their work, their name, everything they had built. Worse, he had spread lies, telling others that the man had been stealing, that he was untrustworthy, that he was too weak to handle the world of business. People who once respected him now looked at him with suspicion. Their eyes said what their mouths did not. He was finished. The man tried to defend himself, but every word he spoke was drowned by the friend's lies. "You think they'll believe you?" the friend sneered, his voice low but sharp. "I already told them everything. You were careless, you were stealing, and now you're caught. Who do you think they'll believe? The man who owns the deal now, or the man standing empty-handed?" Anger burned in the man's chest, but deeper than anger was pain. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. He remembered every promise, every word of loyalty, every moment they had stood together, and now it was ashes. For a long moment, he could not move. His hands shook as he picked up the papers, his eyes scanning the forged signatures, the stolen contracts. It was all legal, clean, designed so perfectly that fighting it would mean years in court, years of being dragged through mud. He set the papers down slowly, his silence heavy. His friend leaned closer, his grin wide. "You should thank me. I let you walk away. I could have destroyed you completely, but I gave you a chance. Leave quietly, and maybe you can still survive in some small corner of the world." The man raised his eyes, and for the first time, his friend flinched. There was no begging, no pleading, no desperate anger in those eyes. There was only silence, deep and sharp, like a storm waiting behind clouds. Without a word, the man turned and walked away, leaving behind the office, the deal, and the friend who had once been a brother. Outside, the whispers grew louder. People pointed, some laughed softly, others shook their heads in pity. The man felt the weight of their stares but did not break his silence. Every step he took away from that building felt heavier, but inside, a fire began to burn. That night, he sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the empty walls. He thought of the betrayal, of the lies, of the laughter that had followed him as he walked away. His hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight. He whispered into the darkness, "This is not the end." The memory of his friend's arrogant grin, the sound of his mocking words, repeated in his head like a drum. It did not crush him, it sharpened him. He knew now what trust meant, what betrayal could do, and what silence could build. He would not scream for justice. He would not beg for fairness. He would wait. He would plan. And when the time came, he would strike with a force his friend could never imagine. In the days that followed, the friend boasted loudly, showing off his new wealth, throwing parties, and laughing about how easy it had been to trick someone who trusted him. He was a fool, he told others. He never understood that money rules everything. People laughed with him, some out of fear, some out of greed, but whispers also began to spread. Whispers that the man who had been betrayed had not disappeared, that his silence was not weakness, but something else entirely. The friend ignored those whispers. He thought he had one. He did not know that the silence he mocked was the silence of a storm waiting to break. The man's betrayal was complete, and so was his resolve. His best friend had chosen money over loyalty. Now he would learn what it meant to face the revenge of someone who had lost everything but patience. The friend wasted no time showing the world what he thought was his grand victory. Within days of betraying the man, he was seen driving a brand new luxury car through the same streets where they had once walked together with empty pockets and big dreams. The engine roared as neighbors stared, some with admiration, some with envy, and some with quiet disgust. He rolled down the windows and smiled proudly, waving at people like a king. He threw parties in expensive restaurants, inviting business partners, clients, and even strangers, boasting about his success. At one party, with loud music and flashing lights, he raised a glass of wine and shouted, "To loyalty. It is worth nothing compared to money." The crowd laughed, some uncomfortably, but no one dared to oppose him. He spoke freely about his so-called brilliance, telling everyone how easy it was to fool someone who trusted too much. He thought trust could build an empire. The friend sneered, his words cutting. But trust is a weakness. Money is the only power in this world. The man's name became a joke in those circles. Whenever his friend introduced himself to new clients, he would tell the story of betrayal like it was a legend, laughing loudly as if destroying someone's life was a clever trick. Every detail was twisted, every truth buried under lies, until people began to believe the man had always been careless, naive, and destined to fail. But while the friend shouted and laughed, the man remained silent. He watched from the shadows, listening to the stories, seeing the arrogance grow. He did not confront, he did not defend. Instead, he let the friend enjoy his rise, because he knew every step upward was a step closer to the fall. The friend's arrogance grew heavier with every passing day. He bought a mansion on the hill, decorated with marble floors, golden chandeliers, and fountains that sprayed water high into the air. He invited guests every weekend, showing off the riches that had come from betrayal. "Look at me now," he bragged. "This is what real success looks like. And the fool who trusted me? He is gone, forgotten, erased." Yet even as he bathed in luxury, cracks began to form. Behind the laughter and the parties, whispers followed him. Some people admired his wealth but mistrusted his ways. Others began to doubt his honesty, wondering if someone so quick to betray a friend could one day betray them too. The friend noticed these whispers but ignored them. "Let them talk," he told himself. "I have money, and money will silence them all." He continued to throw cash around, investing in risky ventures, chasing bigger profits, hungry for more. But no matter how much he gained, it never felt enough. Meanwhile, the man who had been betrayed walked the streets with quiet steps, unnoticed by many. He kept his head down, but his eyes sharp. He visited banks quietly, asked questions calmly, and studied systems that his friend had never bothered to understand. He was not seeking revenge in anger, he was building something stronger, a foundation that could not be shaken by lies. At night, while the friend partied under flashing lights, the man studied papers, numbers, and files under the dim glow of a desk lamp. He worked with patience, never rushing, never showing his hand. He knew greed made people blind, and he was waiting for that blindness to grow. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The friend's arrogance only deepened. He mocked the man in every circle, confident that his betrayal would never catch up with him. He saw himself as untouchable, as a master of the game, as someone who had beaten not just his friend but the very idea of trust. What he did not know was that the silence he dismissed was not weakness. It was preparation. It was the sound of revenge gathering strength, hidden behind calm eyes and patient steps. The man had lost his friend, his name, and his place in the business world, but what he still had was time, focus, and an unbreakable will. And while the friend celebrated greedily in the spotlight, the man was already in the shadows, holding the first keys of something far greater. The very empire the friend believed he ruled. After the betrayal and endless mocking, the man seemed to vanish. Neighbors noticed that his lights no longer glowed at night, his door stayed closed, and his name was no longer spoken in gatherings. Some said he had left the city out of shame. Others claimed he had no strength left to face the world. People shook their heads, whispering that he was finished, a man broken by his own foolish trust. The friend fueled these rumors, laughing loudly whenever the man's name came up. "He is gone," he told anyone who asked. He couldn't survive after losing everything. That's what happens when you are weak. And with that, the man's absence became a story of defeat told in every corner. But the truth was far more dangerous. The man had not disappeared out of shame, he had disappeared to build. In the quiet of a rented room far from familiar streets, he began a new life. Days were spent studying documents, nights passed with eyes fixed on glowing screens filled with financial records, contracts, and hidden numbers that most people ignored. He dug through bank files, public property listings, and tax records, connecting threads that no one else could see. Every line, every figure told a story, and he was learning how to rewrite those stories to his advantage. He lived simply, almost invisibly. Old clothes, cheap meals, no friends visiting, no noise to draw attention. To the world, he looked like a man defeated, just another forgotten soul drifting away. But behind the closed doors of his small room, maps of opportunity were being drawn. He discovered weaknesses in the friend's empire, debts tied to risky deals, loans that looked powerful on paper but could collapse with one wrong move, properties standing on shaky ground because the friend's hunger for wealth had made him careless. Piece by piece, the man gathered information, storing it like weapons for a future battle. His silence was not emptiness. It was the sound of patience sharpening into power. Every coin he had saved, every resource he could find, was invested carefully. He did not chase quick profit. Instead, he placed small pieces of money where they mattered most, places that would later grow into control. Lawyers knew his face but never his full story. Bankers shook his hand but never realized who they were dealing with. He moved like a shadow, leaving no trace of his true identity, only signatures hidden behind firms and contracts. Meanwhile, the friend continued to shine in the spotlight. He bought more cars, expanded into new deals, and mocked his old partner whenever he got the chance. "He's gone forever," he laughed one night at a party. "Some people are born to serve, and some are born to rule. I was born to rule." The guests cheered, the music blared, and the friend's laughter echoed into the night. He did not realize that in another part of the city, the man was calmly signing papers that would one day make that very laughter turn into silence. Months passed, and the man's plan grew stronger. His room, once empty, now held folders stacked high with deeds, ownership documents, and contracts written in careful detail. He read them every night, not with joy, but with focus. The betrayal still burned in his chest, the memory of his friend's mocking voice still sharp in his mind. That pain became his fuel, his reason to keep going. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he would close his eyes and whisper to himself, "They think I am gone. Let them believe it. The deeper they believe, the harder they will fall." Slowly, whispers began spreading again in the city, but this time about mysterious buyers acquiring properties, investments, and shares. No one knew the face behind the name, and the friend dismissed it as unimportant. "Some new fool with money," he scoffed, pouring himself another drink. "No one can touch me." But every time he dismissed it, another piece of his empire quietly slipped away. The man never rushed, never revealed himself. His disappearance was his shield, his invisibility his greatest weapon. The friend believed the game was over, but the truth was, the game had only just begun. The man was no longer fighting as a betrayed friend. He was rising as something much greater, an enemy who had the patience of silence and the power of time. And when the moment came, his return would not just be a comeback. It would be a reckoning. The friend walked into the bank with his usual arrogance, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his gold watch shining under the lights. People turned their heads as he entered, some with respect, others with envy. He carried himself like a man untouchable, someone who believed the world belonged to him. In his hand was a briefcase filled with documents, papers for his next big investment. It was his chance to expand his empire even further, to buy more properties, to cement his place as the king of wealth in the city. He strode to the manager's office, shaking hands with staff on the way, smiling his confident smile. "Prepare the contracts," he said loudly. "Today is the beginning of something greater." The bank manager greeted him politely but with an unusual stiffness in his tone. He handed over a stack of papers, his eyes avoiding the friend's gaze. The friend frowned but ignored it, flipping through the documents with quick fingers. For a moment, everything looked as expected: numbers, figures, agreements. But then his eyes froze on a single line. "Owner of the bank." The name printed there was not what he expected. His face drained of color. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and read again. The name was clear, sharp, undeniable. It was the man he had betrayed. The very man he had mocked, laughed at, and declared ruined now stood as the owner of the very institution he was trying to use for his next big deal. His hands began to tremble, the papers slipping slightly from his grasp. This must be a mistake," he muttered, his voice dry. The manager shook his head slowly. "No mistake. The new ownership has been finalized. The bank has a new master now." The words hit harder than any blow. The friend leaned back in his chair, his mouth open but no sound coming out. He remembered the betrayal, the laughter, the night he called trust useless, the moments he had told crowds that his old partner was finished. And now, in the very heart of his pride, the truth stared back at him with cold clarity. His arrogance cracked like thin glass. He pushed the papers away, his voice rising in panic. "No! This can't be true." He was finished. He had nothing. The manager's eyes flickered with discomfort, but he said firmly, "He has everything now. You will deal with him if you want to move forward." As the words echoed in the office, the friend's heart pounded wildly. He rushed out of the room, his expensive shoes clattering against the polished floor. He barged into the main hall of the bank, his eyes searching desperately, and then he saw him. Standing calmly at the far end of the hall was the man, dressed simply but with an aura of power that no suit could match. He was not surrounded by guards or crowds. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, watching, his calm gaze heavier than any insult. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the friend felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. All the arrogance, all the pride, all the greed that had lifted him vanished in an instant. The man's silence spoke louder than words. He did not need to shout, did not need to remind him of betrayal. The friend remembered everything on his own. The promises broken, the lies spread, the mockery shouted in public. Now the roles had reversed. He was the one trembling, and the man was the one standing unshaken. The friend tried to speak, to explain, to deny, but his throat closed. His briefcase felt heavy in his hand, useless, pathetic. He turned and fled the hall, sweat dripping from his forehead, his heart pounding with fear. Behind him, the man did not move. He only watched, his calm face unreadable, but inside, the storm of revenge was reaching its peak. He had waited in silence, built his power in shadows, and now the truth was revealed. The empire of betrayal was cracking, and the man who once mocked trust had just discovered the cost of his greed. The next morning, the friend returned to the bank, his face pale, his nerves raw. He had not slept, his mind replaying the sight of the man standing there calm and silent. All night he had convinced himself it was a mistake, a cruel trick, something he could undo with money or influence. But as soon as he stepped inside, reality hit him again. Every staff member now carried a different kind of respect in their eyes, not for him, but for the new master. He walked toward the grand hall, sweat dampening his collar. Whispers followed him, sharp as knives. That's the one who betrayed his friend. And now his friend owns the bank. How the tables have turned. He clenched his jaw, pretending not to hear, but his steps grew heavier with each word. At the far end of the hall, the man stood again, the same calm presence as before, his fiancée beside him, her eyes steady, her hand resting gently on his arm. He did not need to move forward. The entire bank felt like his ground, his stage, his power. The friend stopped a few feet away, his arrogance gone. "Listen," he began, his voice shaky. "This is all a misunderstanding. We were partners once, brothers even. You can't," but the man raised his hand slightly, and silence spread. He did not shout, he did not argue. Instead, he placed a thick folder on the counter nearby, opening it slowly for all to see. Inside were the papers, the contracts, the deeds, every piece of proof that showed he now controlled not just the bank but the strings that held the friend's fragile empire together. The crowd pressed closer, eyes widening at the sight of the stamps, the signatures, the undeniable truth written in black and white. The man finally spoke, his voice low but carrying through the entire hall. "You betrayed trust for money. You traded loyalty for greed. You told the world I was finished. But today, the world will see who truly stands." The friend's knees weakened as the weight of the words fell on him. "Please," he whispered, his tone desperate now. "I was wrong. I was blinded. Give me a chance. Don't take everything from me." The man's gaze did not waver. "Everything you have," he said slowly, "was built on my back. You sold me out for coins, but I built foundations you never understood. You laughed at me for being silent. But silence builds storms. And storms do not forgive." Gasps rose in the hall. The friend dropped his briefcase, falling to his knees, his voice cracking as he begged. "Don't do this in front of everyone. Not here. Not like this." But the man's calm was unshakable. He turned his eyes to the crowd, his voice sharp but steady. "This man told you loyalty means nothing. He told you greed is power. Look at him now. Power without loyalty is hollow. Greed without honor destroys itself." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some clapping softly, others whispering in shock. The staff who once bowed to the friend now looked at him with disgust, their respect gone. He covered his face with his hands, ashamed, while the man closed the folder and lifted it under his arm. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only the friend could hear. "You took my name, my honor, my trust. Now I take your empire. You laughed when I fell. Remember this moment when you walk away with nothing." Then he turned, walking out of the hall slowly, every eye following him, every step echoing like thunder. The friend remained kneeling on the floor, his pride shattered, his empire slipping through his fingers, his betrayal finally exposed for all to see. The days that followed the confrontation were like slow poison for the friend. News spread across the city faster than fire in dry fields. The man he had mocked, betrayed, and destroyed was now revealed as the owner of the bank. The one institution that controlled the lifeblood of every deal, every loan, every investment. People who once praised the friend now distanced themselves. Clients refused to return calls, partners pulled out of contracts, and investors whispered that his empire had been built on lies. The lavish parties stopped. The mansion that once glowed with lights fell silent. Its grand halls empty except for the echo of arrogance now turned into fear. His luxury cars gathered dust in the driveway, and servants began resigning one by one, unwilling to serve a man whose name had turned into shame. Meanwhile, the man remained calm. He did not rush, he did not chase. He simply signed papers, approved decisions, and with every stroke of his pen, pieces of his friend's empire slipped away. Accounts were frozen, loans recalled, and properties seized, all through legal channels, all done with quiet precision. The friend tried to fight back, but every lawyer he approached shook their head. You cannot win. The documents are clean. He owns it all now. Anger turned into desperation, desperation into panic. He begged old friends for help, but they turned away, remembering how he had mocked them in the past. He tried to sell his mansion, but buyers offered only scraps, knowing he was drowning. Each day, another part of his wealth disappeared, until he was left with nothing but debts and silence. One evening, unable to bear the walls of his empty mansion, he walked through the city streets alone. Where once people admired him, now they whispered behind his back. Some smirked openly, remembering his cruel words. That's him, they said softly, the man who betrayed his friend and lost everything. Shame burned his face, but there was no escape. And then, as if fate wanted the final blow, he passed the grand bank he had once entered with pride. Its tall glass windows glowed in the night, and at the center stood the man, talking calmly with clients, staff, and partners who now respected him deeply. The sight cut deeper than any wound. The man was not just back, he was higher than ever, standing as the symbol of power built on patience and loyalty. Their eyes met across the distance, and the friend froze. The man did not raise his hand or voice. He only looked at him, a calm, sharp gaze that carried the weight of everything. The betrayal, the silence, the revenge. The friend dropped his head, unable to hold that gaze. For the first time, he truly understood that money gained through betrayal is never real wealth. It crumbles, leaving only ashes. Slowly, he walked away, his steps heavy, his pride gone, his empire nothing but a memory. The man turned back to his work, his expression steady, his revenge complete. He had not destroyed his friend with anger or fists. He had destroyed him with silence, patience, and power so undeniable it could not be questioned. The betrayed man was no longer a victim. He was the master, the owner, the one who had turned betrayal into triumph. And the friend, once proud and arrogant, became a nameless figure fading into the shadows, remembered only as the man who lost everything because he sold his soul for greed.